Hi guys, Mike here. Before we dive into the meat of this video, I want to explain something first. As you can see, there is no live stream today, and I really apologize for that. I had so many other things planned, but things happened that I had to change my plans. As you can see from the title of this video, the series I'm starting in November will create an open world multiplayer game prototype. Or for short, a kind of MMO to make maybe more sense of it. And this won't change. I still will do this. But I originally wanted to recreate the Star Wars Old Republic MMO. Not the whole game, but more showing how to create the MMO mechanics and use the Star Wars theme for that, so that I can focus on the game and not so much on design. And this is why you have seen in last video in my room, this was no trap, this was really meant to be using Star Wars, using the Old Republic. But I was too naive to believe that if I don't make money from it, everything will be fine. But during this week, when talking to friends and people from the industry, I realized that there is more at stake. To make it short, I don't want to risk the channel being struck down by YouTube or even shut down at all. I put so much effort in this channel, reaching 1K subs and having a wonderful community so far. I don't really want to risk losing all this just because I use Star Wars and getting striked and getting sues and whatever. There's so much at stake. And that is why I cannot present everything I had planned for the live stream, like screenshots, like stuff I prepared to show. I really can't do this now. And this is why there will not be a live stream today. But I will do this video to show you instead what this series will be about that will start on November the 20th. So with that said, let's get started and let me show you guys what is coming, what you can look out for in November, and which will be awesome. So this video will be more slides than images and other stuff, but I will do live presentations of something that I can show, but more on this later. So what is this series about? So we're creating an open world multiplayer game prototype, like an MMO. It's actually an MMO, but MMO can mean so much to so different people that I thought about, okay, I'm using the word or the set or the description open world multiplayer game prototype. We are not creating a full game. I would never be able to do this, but it's going to be a prototype and I'm trying to recreate many mechanics and features that MMOs have. More on that in a few minutes or seconds. But first, we are going to target high-end PCs using what I call the future workflow. So Unreal Engine 5 opened the door for a lot of new stuff that right now artists and many people in the industry are trying to figure out workflows, how to work best with it, because now we have the possibility to use infinite detail almost in the game, and there is so much that needs to be addressed and figured out how you can create a good workflow for it. And I'm in the middle of creating a workflow which I call the future workflow, and that is what we'll be using. We're using all the new Unreal Engine 5 features, and we're, like I said, implementing common MMORPG game mechanics, like quest system, like skill systems, and so on and so forth. And we're covering many areas of game development. So this means like we are creating the game art, we are doing the programming, visual effects, cinematics, all that stuff. And for those who don't want to use or think they can't do the game art, but I will show ways how you can really do it and follow along. But for those that don't want to do it, I will provide the assets that I create myself. We will see how that works in the future. And as the title suggests, it's multiplayer. So we are really going to create a multiplayer MMO prototype. First, I thought about doing single player only, not just doing the mechanics and kind of like imagine, we are in a MMO world. But then I stumbled upon Saber Dart Studios and its great open world server system that really allows us to implement all the online multiplayer features that we need, or rather the possibility to have our server instances managed and many, many more things. I will come to this in a second in its own slide. The whole project is created using C++ and blueprints. So I've seen it many times in the comments on my videos and people asking, can't we do everything in C++? And it's not a real good way, because in some parts you really need blueprints. Blueprints make it easier, especially if you're working in teams later on. I mean, this will be a solo project, but it will be so much easier for development if we have a good combination of C++ and blueprints. And this series will be an ongoing series with categorized videos and live streams. So I plan on having multiple playlists that cover game art, a playlist that covers general programming, that covers other things that we'll show in a second. So this will be like single videos and sometimes live streams that I plan. I just have to see how everything turns out, how everything goes after the start, and how this series can grow. So as a general info, the series will show how to approach specific aspects of MMO creation. Like I said, there will be a lot of game systems like inventory, equipment, skill, and all of that, which you guys can do as well and create the MMO with me or your own. And this is what I want down here. I want you to create your own prototype and share your progress on my upcoming Discord server that I'm starting to do as well when the series starts. But if you're feeling like an MMO is too big or this is not what you want to do, you can get a lot of things out of it. Like how to, like I said, create an inventory system and many more things. And this series will start with a sci-fi setting, but more modular development will also allow for fantasy setting in the future when UE5 releases. And that means that right now, UE5 is still early access. There are many issues right now, and like land masses, water, and so many things are not really supported yet with Newman and Nanite and stuff. So we will have to wait for that, for the release, to know how to really work with it when it comes to more fantasy settings where we really need water, foliage, and so on. Right now we can get away with like moons, rock planets like Mars or something that we can do with mega scans or our custom made rocks and stuff. And the prototype that we're creating will mostly be created by me on the side. And then I will show the specific and important topics of it in recorded videos and live streams, so that I'm not leaving out anything. It would just be tedious for me to sit down, program or create this thing and you watching me, but I will rather want you to get the ideas of how things work out of those videos, like how to model a certain prop, how to create the environment with mega assemblies, and all of that stuff. But not that you have to watch me doing my game, but like I said, I want you to create your own game. I want you to create your own MMO or game prototype from that what you learn from the videos. And I think this is a much better way than just me recording something and you following along. I want you to learn the specifics, what I did, and then apply it to your own game, your own project. So before we continue, there's a small disclaimer that I want to present or tell you about, so that you don't get your hopes up for stuff that will not be coming or that I'm not really doing. So like this series is an ongoing series that will last for several months, if not maybe for 1 year or two, because this is a really big project, and you will see it from the following slides what this will entail and really what I plan on doing over this long span of time. So it's going to be a long series. It's the only series that I'm doing for the channel. This is what I want to do now. And there's so much stuff for all of us to get into, get to know, and create a cool game that hopefully at a certain stage I will make online so that all of us together can play this together online. But it's a long step, it's a long time period, but it's gonna be great. So this series focuses on a UE5 only workflow. We are not using Unreal Engine 4 at any time, only maybe sometimes when we need to get some assets from the marketplace into a reference project that we can then export to our UE5 project, but UE5 only for development. And high-end PCs and consoles only. The workflow that we are using really focuses on the future workflow, so future PCs and consoles, stuff that will probably coming out or will be normal in a year or two or maybe 3 years, I don't know. But it's the future, and with using Nanite and Lumen and all that good stuff, we really need high-end PCs. So no mobile devices or virtual reality. I'm not really covering these. So just that you know, high-end PCs and UE5 only. And to say, I'm still exploring the full potential of what UE5 can do with all its new features and workflows. And so the shown approach here and the design of the game is not set in stone, like I said, and might change in the future. And while I help to teach the latest in Unreal Engine 5, Unreal Engine 5 is still not a full release, it's early access. And the features can change, update, or be altered in any way that will make new workflows necessary to create later. So just to mention this is we're working with a early access and things might change. I might adapt workflows that are now something that needs to be done because Unreal doesn't yet support it, but this just as a side note. So what UE5 features are we going to use? Of course, we're going to use Nanite, Lumen, virtual shadow maps, all that good stuff that makes the scene look awesome, and that allows us to create high poly, detailed meshes, use real-time global illumination, and the virtual shadow map system to make beautiful scenes. Then we use world partition and data layers to make it easier to create all these big environments that we need to partition into zones and stuff. So this will really come in handy really when we are creating these maps and worlds and stuff. And that's where we're going to use mega assemblies as well. Like first using mega scans and assembling, like you've maybe seen from the Ancient Valley demo, where they assembled several assets together into one big blueprint asset that you can track into the scene and more efficiently create your environment. This is what we are going to do. Then what is really a new great feature is the modular game feature system that allows us to make more easily plug and play game features, add them like maybe DLCs or extend new features, remove features, And this will probably allow us also that when we start now sci-fi, that we can change the underlying system to a more fantasy-like combat system and stuff. So this will come really in handy and will be combined greatly with the gameplay ability system, but more on that later. And then we're using the enhanced input system that I think was released also as a beta plugin or whatever in Unreal Engine 4 and is now available also in Unreal Engine 5. And then we're using meta sounds, which will replace the old Q system for sounds and audio in the future. So this is the Unreal Engine 5 features that we're using. And before we go into the general Unreal stuff, I want to mention something for you guys to look at is a great video from Saber Dart Studios. This is the guy Dart. He created that open world server system that we're using, and he and his team really looked into Unreal Engine 5 for open world scenarios, for big persistent worlds. And this is a real cool video that I really highly recommend for you all to. So these are the UE5 features, and the general Unreal features that we are going to have a look at or are using will be the gameplay ability system. This will be a major part in our series. We will heavily use this for all the abilities that our game character might have, not only like combat abilities, but also equipping weapons, armor, death, unconsciousness, changing run speed, and many other non-combat activities can all be done with the gameplay ability system, which supports multiplayer and replication from the get-go. So it's really implemented deep into that system so that we don't have to really recreate the whole wheel and have to figure things out. It's all there in that system. And this is why Fortnite and Paragon use this system and still using it today. So this is where we really heavily going to focus on. Then the multiplayer framework where we need it, AI framework. Then we are going to do character animation, like retargeting, blend spaces, animation montages, everything that we need for animating our characters. Then one thing I also want to do is do localization. So the game will be implemented in English, of course, but I want to make it so that we can do also that's why I'm doing a German version, like localizing it, or you can do Spanish later on. So using the localization system from Unreal for our game series, and then use stuff like Niagara for visual effects and stuff, Sequencer for cinematics, chaos physics maybe to make some things destructible. Who knows what we will come up with in the future for this game. And then, of course, like I mentioned, it's the open world server system from Saber Dart Studios. And this allows us to build large worlds spanning multiple maps, split maps into multiple zones. And the good thing about this system is it manages our world server instances, and it comes with character storage. Let me open up the site, saberdartstudios.com, and here you can see like it also has a lot of stuff as well, not only the managing of the servers, the load balancing and stuff, also persistent character storage. It supports the gameplay abilities, account management, character creation. I mean, we will do all our graphics and all our stuffs, but this system really allows us to create a real multiplayer game. I wouldn't be able in that time do it on my own, and I'm glad that Dart did it. And thanks to Epic's Mega Grant, which you can see here, open world server is now open source and free, and this will allow us to use this in this series. If it still would cost money, I would have bought it for myself, but right now it's awesome that Epic supported him with the mega grant, and this is a huge thing now that this is open source and we can use it for this series. Now that you know about all the technology, let's look at the video categories that I mentioned in the beginning. So we will, or rather I will create several playlists and one big playlist so that when I make videos about game art, game programming, user interface implementation, that I label these like with a specific color in the thumbnail that you can see, okay, maybe red is art, blue is programming, green is user interface, or whatever, you know, and put them in the respective playlists. And if you are there only to see the game programming side and are not interested in the game art, you don't have to do it. I will try to, like I said, make the assets and stuff that we create in this series available for you to download to follow along as much as you want. If you want to do all that stuff with me, that would be awesome, that would be great. But if you're not into game art or don't want to give it a try, then yeah, just follow along with the others and I will see what I can do to provide all the assets that are possible. There is stuff that I will use in my game that I can't share, like stuff that I bought on the marketplace and so on. But most of the stuff that I'm creating, I can make publicly available for you, but only for this project to use when you are taking part, maybe in Discord and showing your progress and so on. So let's have a look at game art elements. What are we creating in this game? We are creating 2D UI elements and we're using Blender for that. So it's going to be interesting to see. A couple of slides, I will show you something which is really awesome. Then we're creating props, environment pieces, vehicles, spaceships, nature and organic elements where it's necessary, like rocks and maybe some plants and stuff. And maybe also use mega scans where possible, where it makes sense. And then there's something what we all need for an MMO, but which is the toughest to do, creating characters and creatures. So I am looking right now into sculpting and creating characters and creatures. But there is something that I plan maybe on buying, and it's a little bit expensive, but it might make things a lot easier, is using the Character Creator 3 suite with iClone 7 and all that stuff. And that allows me to create characters faster than really sculpting them and stuff, but I'm not sure. So this is something that you might not be able to follow along. So in the beginning anyways, we will use the Paragon assets or the Paragon characters, the sci-fi characters there for all our purposes. And then we just have a look at how we continue with this. But this will be something later down the road. So how do we do all this? And this is now the game art workflow that I'm currently in, let's say, development, or that is based on someone else's workflow for rendering hard surface sci-fi stuff in Blender. And I'm going to take this workflow with a twist for real time. And these guys are the Blender brothers, and they are really amazing. Josh and Ryu, they do awesome work. I will show you in a second what they create. And this from those guys, I learned a lot using Blender, the add-on workflow, using hard ups and box cutter and stuff. And they're using their workflow basically for rendering in Blender, creating images from them. And our goal is to use these high poly meshes that we are creating, use them in Unreal without, and comes down to the advantages of this workflow: no normal map banking, no painting in Substance Painter, Quixel Mixer, no LOD creation, no custom light map creation, all that stuff that took a while. And I'm coming also from that old workflow where you had to create a high poly mesh, then a low poly mesh, bake the detail down into normal maps, and so much pain and stuff. And what we are using is we are creating a material library in Unreal with tileable textures for metals, plastics, and many other material types, and using these on the props or meshes that we create, instead of like painting textures and like many of you maybe have seen that are into game art, that workflow that you're using, which is still valid, by the way. And Josh from Blenderbros, Josh and View, they have a great series and do a lot of great videos about it, how to create the hard surface stuff and do low poly versions that will work with the UE4 workflow, or still for mid level PCs, for VR, for mobile, and so on. But because we are focusing on the future workflow using high poly meshes, that's what Unreal Engine 5 allows us. Using Nanite, we are creating high poly meshes and modeling in most of the details. Only for small details we will use, like you can see, detail, decals, trim sheets, and so on. This might be a lot to digest right now. So what it comes down to is we are going to use two workflows, kind of like one using material layers for mostly props, characters. For every element that is probably not bigger than 2 meters, we can use it for environment pieces if we split them up and make them modular. But for bigger meshes like Starship, vehicles, and other huge elements, we are going to use the Star Citizen workflow, which is a kind of multi-material workflow using material instances. I will show in a couple of minutes a live demo about, or showing you how material layers work and how, or the multi-material system, the differences between them. And the cool thing about let's say if you're focusing on high-end PCs, this is really material layers are efficient, and multi-materials also, it's gonna be great, and we can really create high detailed meshes with lots of roundness, no need to worry about polys and stuff. It's gonna be interesting. And for small details, like I said, we're using detail decals and trim sheets. So sometimes it is too much time intensive to model all those small details in and then UV it and repair, or the shading issues that we get from the Boolean workflow. I will get into all of this when we get into modeling, and which will be really soon when the series starts. So just to give you a short overview of what we are doing, and we are creating all of that stuff, the decals, trim sheets, even the masks is also a really powerful thing about the material layers, where we can have only one material, which is the advantage of material layers, but then use different masks to blend in materials, and masks for crime, edgeware, and all that stuff. And I'm currently looking at creating edgeware and crime in Blender, but also in Quixel Mixer. I have Substance Painter and Substance Designer. I have a perpetual license for that, but this costs money, and Quixel Mixer is free, Blender is free, so I want you to follow along, and this is why I'm looking into workflows on how to create these masks in these software programs and not use the expensive Adobe software. And also like creating 2D info decals, like infographics, like what you see text blended onto meshes. We will create that in Blender. It's also a workflow. I will call it, maybe it's not a workflow, but I've seen Josh and Ryu do it, and it's so awesome. They create those graphics in Blender. We don't need anything like Illustrator or a vector program. We need to use Photoshop, and I'm going to use Affinity Photo, which is really affordable, and it's really comparable to Photoshop. It's really awesome, and it costs only like $50 or something. At least that's when I looked at it the last. So it's really affordable. And also those add-ons that we use will cost money. There's a vanilla Blender workflow that is also possible. It will just take more time. Josh really has some cool videos on this. He uses add-ons and also shows the vanilla workflow in his tutorials. I will show you all of this when we get into modeling and stuff. And I just wanted to do an overview and to really show you as an example the 2D info decal workflow that I've seen Josh and Ryu do, like creating these cool things just in Blender. And it's amazing. Just let's have a look where you can see he's creating text and stuff, creating all these elements, everything in Blender. And then at the end in Photoshop, and we're trying to use Affinity Photo, or you can use GIMP if you're familiar with it, to create these final pieces and stuff. It's really awesome what these guys do. And just to show you, so for example, this is the Blenderbros portfolio on ArtStation. Look at what these guys are creating, and the Blenderbros homepage, all their products. I own every one of them. Everyone is great. So it's such a huge resource on how to create hard surface models. And I learned so much from these guys. And I'm still learning and still getting into it. And so when we are creating models in the course or in a series, then what I'm going to do is I will show you how I create, for example, like a crate or something. But I can't really go into detail on how box cutter, on how Hardops works, decal machine. Like then I say, okay, go get the ultimate guide to Hardops and box cutter. I don't get any money from these guys. I just love them in a way. They are so amazing. This info is really amazing. I will show some workflows, of course, but I can't really create my own videos on how to use Hardops, box cutter. And these guys also these are the courses they have, which are really great. And then Josh has a YouTube site with a ton of free videos, which alone are amazing. And like I said, for an older workflow that shows how to create game assets that use Painter for painting, high poly, low poly, normal map baking, and so on. This is the ultimate guide to look at. And but we're going a different route. And also Ryu has a lot of awesome stuff. Box cutter, Hardops, how you use add-ons, how you create several things. So even from those videos alone. So I would just suggest go ahead, subscribe to them, look at those videos. We are going to use their approach on Boolean modeling, hard surface modeling in the course. Like I said, with a twist, because we are going to use the high poly models and not creating any low polys and baking stuff. So things will be a little bit different, and getting into material layers, into the material instance workflow in Unreal with the material library that we're creating. So I think now it's time, and I talked a lot now and about this workflow. Let me show you a little bit in Blender some simple stuff that I did that I can show now and not in like I planned. So let's go into Unreal first and have a look at it. So inside of Unreal, I prepared some simple models to show multi-material versions, the material layer system, and some sci-fi looking stuff that I just came up with that can show how detailed or high detailed a mesh can be, looks great, and we can run thousands of instances and still have a lot of FPS. So when we will create the series and the project in November, then we will start by creating the project, of course, and creating also a material library and defining our project structure and using naming conventions and all that stuff, which is really important. And what I used to do since the beginning is that I create like folders for game assets for the game itself, but using an underscore in front of it so that they are always on top. Like if we are importing some other marketplace libraries or things, sometimes the folder really gets blown up with a lot of folders and stuff, and I need structure. We need structure for this project. So what we will do is we have a game assets folder, then there will be materials, meshes, and the materials itself. I start creating that library already. So we're going to have master materials for our later instances and for our layered material. And before I really show how this looks like a little bit, let's do it like this, where we have all these instances that we are going to use. So we have emissive materials, class materials, we have simple metals, we have plastics, and I created the same thing for material layers so that we have metals as layers, plastics as layers, and this will change a lot when the series starts. This was just the initial version of it. But it will show that, let's take our cylinder, for example. It has, if we scroll it up here, it has several materials, like 6 materials, that are basically 6 texture sheets. And usually for each material, there will be 1 draw call. So in some cases for high NPCs, it doesn't matter so much anymore. I've seen environments where pieces have like 15 materials or something on, and you can see this. There's in the marketplace, there is like a example project called Zero Gravity, which uses this workflow in some ways. And there are some items, meshes that have like 15 materials and stuff. But as good as this material system is, or having multiple materials on a mesh, when you want to add crime and stuff, you have to go through different things to make it work. And with the multi-layer system, it is so much better that we can use masks to define edgeware, crime, and even the materials itself, like we've seen here. And this is the example that I have with box ID and box multiple. The ID uses the ID mask or the layer system, or has an ID mask on it, and this box has the multiple materials, like this sci-fi cylinder has. And you can see, let me just scroll in a little bit. It's not perfect. I haven't fixed all the shading issues yet here that you can see, but you can see the roundness of it. It's amazing. There's no baked normal maps and stuff. It just works like this. And so you can see this mesh here has 2000 triangles with nanite enabled. If we go to right click nanite and disable, you can see that originally this piece has 21,000 triangles, and nanite reduces it and makes it more efficient, and we can use it really awesomely. This is the original mesh without nanite, which if we have thousands of it, then we get like almost no FPS. And let's enable nanite for this mesh again, and it works awesomely. So let's have a look at our box, for example. You can see this is the same kind of thing, multiple materials on this box, and we have the ID or the layered material system, which only has this layered material on it. And if we go browse it, you can see this is the layered material. It has the normal details and stuff, and then we have layered materials. He's compiling the shaders right now, which similar to Photoshop, we have a background material, which will be the whole the initial material for this whole mesh, and then we are using layers based on a mask, which is this ID map, and we're using the RGB channels for it. And based on the channel, let's say for this layer, we are selecting the green channel, and then saying this red plastic should be where the green or where it's white in that channel. So it would be this bottom part down here. And so we can stack up these different layers with different materials, and then we can have, instead of like a normal ID map like this, we can create our own custom mask maps. So we would have maybe several crime or edge masks placed into one texture. So we could, for each channel RGB and A, we could place textures in it and sample them in here. And this is what it makes so powerful, this whole material layer system. And what I can show you before, I mean, we will really dig into it. So it needs some setup. We have a material layers which a master material for layered material, which looks like this. And let me close all this. And then we will have a material layer blend, which, for example, here is our RGBA mask, which kind of like has an input, and we use a channel selection. I will explain all this when it comes down to creating that library and stuff. But this is how we would create our initial setups for our blend material, for our master material, and then we have simple layers. And so let's go have a look at the master layer, metal and plastic, that I created. So we have an output material attributes. Like I said, I will explain this in detail. This is a simple material which has a color set, the metallic fixed, and this is a parameter, the roughness and specular are parameters. So this is a simple material that I created for that. And so for metal, plastics, but things will be more complicated. What I'm planning is on using the Paragon characters. So, and for a kind of like, I'm just showing something before we get to the slides again, or get to Blender. We're getting to Blender. You can see here, let's hit play. This is a simple scene with these sci-fi things. And if I enter stat FPS, for example, we can see this scene runs at 120 frames per second. We have so many of these, and we can still add so many more. We have emissive materials here, and this is really awesome. And it looks great. Might be a bit too blurry right now. So yeah, this is kind of like how we will create assets in the future and using Unreal Engine 5 with it. So now let's head over to Blender to give you a real short overview. Okay, so here in Blender, I prepared a little scene where we have our cube, and to show you the ways of how we would bake ID maps. Baking usually inside of Blender is very tedious, and yeah, it doesn't really work with vanilla Blender. But there's like a really helpful tool that we're going to use, Text Tools. And here what we can do is, you can see there's a color ID section. We are going to, let's say, what we need is we need our red, green, and blue channels and our basic black material that we are going to use. And so for that we can assign with the material that we use as the base. So what I would do is, let's say, select everything, assign that black color to all selected faces. You can see this cube now is black. And what we can do is, for example, if we hit bake, then you can't really see it now, everything is baked black. But if we are going like what we did with, let me go to wireframe mode, to this mode, let's select everything through. You can see the faces selected here in the UV. And let's say we want to assign the color red to these faces. We can hit assign, and it's assigned red. And if we are going, for example, to bake now, if we are using two materials, for example, we would have red and the standard. If we hit bake, you can see it baked the color for the ID map for that red channel here. If we want to select, let's say, only a couple of these, let's say only these faces, and want to assign it blue for another material, and then click bake, then let's say this, he created this blue, and we can save this image to use as an ID map in Unreal. And for a third color, if we select, let's say, these up here, we add green and hit bake, you can see how fast it is. I tried to bake it in Blender with the usual method of creating nodes and stuff, and it took a while, it didn't really work, and these text tools are really amazing. And once we have this ID map, then we can use this with that blending mask in the material layers to use the RGBA mask. There might be other possibilities later that we could use, but this is a nice, neat way that we can do for creating the ID masks. And when we model later on our crates and environments and all that stuff, then we could use selection sets to easily select between them, add the color, the material, and then bake out the map. And just to show you the box here, and you can see here, this one has 4 materials, while the other, when we get rid of those materials, clear them out, and just use the ID mask for blending, then we only have 1 material for the whole mesh and can blend many materials with it. And we don't need to worry about textile density and stuff because these are tileable materials. They work perfectly. And but I will go into more detail when we all going to use this, when there will be videos on modeling and creating art. So after all the technical stuff, let's have a look at the actual MMO RPG features or game systems that we are creating. So it's a lot, and this is why this might all take so long, that the series might go on for months and maybe years, who knows. We will see. So we are going to create like a character system where you have gear, weapons, and all that stuff. Skill system for the abilities and skills that the characters can have. Inventory system, a dialogue system that we need for questing and talking to other people. Quest systems, which will be a special dialogue system. Crafting. We will have maps, mini maps, and a world map. We will have chat, and then something that people, beside companions maybe, but what people may say would be endgame collecting minions, collecting mounts, or we have a mount system to travel faster in the world, housing system, collecting housing items and stuff, and then mini games. And this is a special thing that I want to do. There's actually, and I will show it at the end of the slides, an example that I did back in Unity, which was supposed to be my game that I always wanted to create until it now became an MMO. So this game will make its comeback as a mini game, but more on this later. So then we will create basic game UI. For all these systems, we need some user interfaces for them. And sadly, I really can't show any pictures. I made a lot of screenshots from Final Fantasy XIV that I'm playing a lot right now, and from Star Wars The Old Republic, and showing you all those different things. I will use these as references, but I really don't want to show images of it. I'm not really sure about copyrights and all that stuff right now. So this is why we just have to stick to slides right now. So there will be a main menu, character creation and character selection screen, where you can select all the characters that you have created or create new characters. And down the road, probably, but this will be far into the series, where we might be actually customize our character. Changing hair, changing color, and so on and so forth. But the character creation will be just, in the beginning, creating a simple Paragon character or something until we can create our own characters and so on. Then we have an options menu for setting our preferences, graphics, audio, key maps, and all that stuff. Then character equipment dialog, so that we can drag and drop gear from our inventory to the character. And then we have the inventory dialog in combination. So it's all these dialogues and menus and stuff that we need to create: skills, ability, quest log, a world and minimap, and the HUD with HUD bars, status bars, quest info, chat, and all that stuff. And this is what I mentioned in the beginning, that even if you're not interested in doing an MMO or are thinking that's too much for you, you can pick stuff. If you want to know how to create a main menu, then this video will be for you. If you want to know how to do options, these videos, whatever they will be, would be for you, and so on and so forth. If you need quest logs, if you need inventory for another type of game. So this, I will create this, all that stuff in a sense of an MMO, but you can use it for other purposes as well. Then the combat system that we are going to create will be a tab-based combat system and not a kind of action-oriented combat system. So we will have global and off-global cooldowns, if you guys are familiar with that. If not, I will explain all this, how we will create a global timer and then have skills that we can weave in between those global cooldowns and all that good stuff. And with that comes the Holy Trinity with tank, healer, DPS, plus maybe a support class or support role rather. And this might be interesting to do in a sci-fi environment. How would a healer with a gun look like a combat medic or something? And a tank would be like a commando type character. DPS could be sharpshooter and just a normal marksman or something. So it's going to be interesting to create and develop these kinds of systems. Then we have a skill tree based profession system, and based on what I so love about Final Fantasy XIV is that, not like in World of Warcraft or Star Wars The Old Republic, when you create a character, you have to select a class and you're stuck with that class. There might be some changes that you can do in between, changing some ways, but you're not able to do every class or job profession that you want. And in Final Fantasy, you can really create use or level all professions, jobs that you want, from samurai to dragoon to white mage and all that stuff. So, and this is why we kind of like have a profession system here. Then you can start with a profession, but choose different professions down the road. And then there will be 3 different type of professions or categories, like we have combat, crafting, and gathering professions. So this will be the general idea of the combat system and the profession system that we are going to implement. And then further on, we will have quests and dungeon types. So in the beginning, we will have not many quests, or I'm not sure how to do it, because I really want to start as a sandbox MMO and not a story-driven theme-based MMO, which can come later down the road. So in the beginning, it might be going out in the wild and killing stuff, getting normal quests, missions that I call them. And later we will add some story, and there will be story campaigns, big mission, story-driven missions and stuff, which have missions and operations. Operations, which are your dungeons and raids. So there will be 4-player dungeons, 8-player dungeons, and 24-player dungeons. And the normal missions, or the missions would be normal quests, like your fetch and kill quests. Then we have unlock quests, which when you finish that quest, you may unlock certain features in the game. A certain kind of dungeon, for example, may be unlocked through a quest, and so on. Then we have profession quests, that if you're, let's say, doing a combat medic, for example, that this profession will have a special quest or special quests, many quests, with maybe a story, who knows. We'll see how this goes. Then there will be space fights, so we will have space missions. And world bosses and heroic missions will be hard, kind of like missions that you probably need to do co-op with another player, or maybe even up to 4 players or something, which is not a instant dungeon, but more like in the open world you will be able to kill or to do this mission, and you probably need to do it with several players together. And then we come to the collectibles, mini games, and miscellaneous, and we're almost done with the slides, and it's I think almost an hour or more, so it's finally time. But this is a big series that is coming, so it takes some time to explain. And finally, what we will have are collectibles in the game, where you can collect gear, mounts, companions, minions, housing items, game cards, and this is where I come to the game that I mentioned earlier, which will be used by one of the mini games, the card tactics game, and I show that in the next slide. So after the collectibles, we have the mini games, which will be the card tactics game. Then I thought about like a hover bike racing, what I loved in Final Fantasy, these chocobo races. I would love to do like with those hover bikes and stuff, and or swoop racing that you might be familiar with, and do them in the game. And then maybe some arcade games, like when we are in the Mars Academy and in the recreation area, you will see old kind of arcades that you can play, like some shoot 'em ups or stuff. So even here in those kind of mini games that we will do, there is some value in them for you if you just want to create a shoot 'em up or a racing game or something, which will be really interesting to do. And then miscellaneous, there will be like vistas or points of interest that we can find, that you can, like a challenge log, where you can have to find all points of interest on this planet or that planet, and we will see how this turns out. This is also just the what I would love to do in that game. This is what belongs to a MMO, collectables, mini games, various different things. So this is what we are trying or going to implement in that long series. And here we have the card tactics game. This is something that I did way back, I think 2 years ago in Unity. Never finished it. And this is a combination between a trading card game and a tactics game. I started with a square grid first, but then moved on to a hex grid, which will be what we are implementing here as well. And there you can play your starships based from the cards on the field, move them on the playing field, and play support cards like this, for example, here, Desperate Attack, which make a starship unit attack +2 until end of turn. So there will be several card types in the game that will support cards, your typical trading card game, but combined with a tactics game. And there's like, this is where I tested also, or originally did it in German, later then changed it over. So that's why you see it here still in German. A deck editor where you see your whole collection and then can create decks based on it. So this is what this is the first mini game that we are creating. And, but this probably will be also a little bit more into the series. Once we created like the first initial planet, or I imagine like the Mars Academy, I have some story stuff behind it, and when the series starts I will get more into it. So, but this is something you can look forward to. This could actually be a game on itself, in itself. So yeah. So I think that's the last slide, almost the last slide. So we're coming to an end of this presentation. And when the series starts on November 20th, we will start by creating the project, setting up a Git repository for source control, but only locally for now, because with all the assets and stuff, it's really crazy to do it online, and I'm really only source controlling our source and some items. So we will get into this, and then later down the road we can see what we can do to really source control the whole project. Then we are setting up the open world server system, which will be essential for the start. Then defining project structure and naming conventions, creating that material library, then doing our first level creation and gray boxing. So I'm thinking about Mars, recreating Mars. There will be an Academy of the Earth Alliance there that I have in mind for the story. And so we would be creating the outside level, gray boxing some habitats and stuff, doing user interface creation for a character to move around, and using the character movement and abilities. And this will be a lot in its own. And then we will start creating the academy, probably the habitats outside, the inside thing, environments, and so on. So a lot to do, but this is how we will get started. And yeah, I hope I can see you there, that you will be part of that journey. And again, some shout outs beforehand to the Blenderbros, which really made this possible in some ways, from what they teach and show how to do stuff. This will be an essential part. And of course, Saber Dart Studios, the open world server system, and Dart himself gave me a lot of good insights and is a valuable resource. So I guess that's it for this slide. It was a long video. Sorry that it didn't was a live stream, but through my naiveness, whatever, I couldn't do the Star Wars stuff that I wanted to do. And maybe in the end, it's a better way to create my own stuff that I can also share with you guys. But because this would have been a problem if I created Star Wars assets, I don't know if I would have been able to share them, that you can reuse them. So this is really crazy stuff that I want to prevent. I don't want this channel to get striked or even shut down or whatever. So let us start this by creating our own stuff, our own sci-fi world, which will go into the direction of, let's say, Star Citizen and the Expanse TV series and stuff, something in a direction like this. So probably no aliens, maybe some creatures. We'll see how it will go. So yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you will join this epic journey on November the 20th, and I guess I'll see you then. Thanks for watching, and yeah, until then, bye bye.